This is Allegedly in Alberta, powered by Streamlabs Talk Studio with your host, Darrin Thompson.
There's a lot of stuff that I think sugar-coated to try and make it more palatable, but unfortunately we're at a crossroads where it just isn't anymore, and we're starting to see a lot of weaponization of language and stuff that's just going to continue to get a lot worse. Even to your point of not having enough money to fight a lawsuit, we're seeing more slap lawsuits. We're seeing more legal actions taken against progressive voices, more attempted silencing, and I think that's going to get worse.
100%. So you have the experience with the slap suits. I know a lot of our listeners and viewers would be interested. I know I'm interested to learn more about them. And as I said, just make sure my family's not listening because I really don't want to know about them. But of course, the concept is about censorship. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct, 100%. So SLAP actually stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. So the idea of SLAP lawsuit is to shut you up. So it can be one or the other. They can go directly after you and take actual legal action, or they can do something like a cease and desist, threatening you with legal action if you continue to talk. And almost unanimous across the board, what ends up happening with these SLAP lawsuits is it's a bigger voice with deeper pockets who doesn't want their story told. So that's why you're seeing a lot of independent journalists who are getting shushed, essentially. And they do it because what happens is you write something out, you open your email, there's a cease and desist in that email saying, if you talk about this at all, we are taking you to court. You're going to have to get a lawyer. We will drag this out as long as we can. These are the things we're going to say about you. These are the things that we're going to move forward with. And as a smaller content creator, you have a uh-oh moment, and you have to decide, is it worth financial risk? Essentially, it's just legalese for, hey, I don't like that you are exposing me. Shut the F up. Occasionally, you'll get somebody who really does just slap a lawsuit because there is somebody who's harassing them or saying things about them that are untrue. But other provinces, Ontario and British Columbia, figured out how to avoid slap lawsuits, and they have ended slap legislation, but still allow people to protect themselves if they're being slandered. There's just a higher burden of proof. You just have to show that you're not doing this frivolously. Alberta, sky's the limits. You're mad that somebody has said something truthful about you. You don't want that out in the open. You can send a cease and desist. You can move towards legal actions against them and shut them up, even if they're right.
You're watching Allegedly in Alberta, authorized by the Alberta Accountability Alliance, abpulley.ca. So there's our political our shield, per se. Been many conversations, and the why behind that is I actually was targeted by Elections Alberta. So if anyone who thinks Elections Alberta is an independent organization, I could say allegedly there's a lot of evidence previously. I think the new elections commissioner is doing things on the up and up now, filing charges against David Parker and Take Back Alberta. The previous CEO allegedly suspecting a direct connection to the UCP. I just couldn't connect it. When I was under investigation, they had a former cop who was their investigator. So lovely when I wear my All Couriers Are Beautiful shirts and use the ACAB sort of thing. They don't appreciate that. But yeah, I was threatened with jail time. I was threatened with they would get a search warrant for my house and take my laptop and take all things if I didn't comply and give them all the evidence that they were looking for. And the evidence was the fact that I was making Fuck Kenny merchandise, and I offered it to the NDP. They didn't respond because whatever it was at the time, but that alleged my offer was then enough for them to call an investigation on me. And then and I will share it with our paid subscribers for Substack. Eventually I will upload the audio from the from the interrogation, where I'm actually accused of being dark money, like Russian, trying to infiltrate the elections on behalf of the NDP, that I'm a Russian op.
Yeah,
I'm like,
that does not check out. I'm just gonna say I don't think that the Russians are throwing their money behind a progressive party.
no, not at all. And I mean,
No.
and it all came from a TikTok that I did, a 10-part TikTok, because I usually talk for too long and then I had to like splice it up or whatever. But in there, I explained exactly what Bill 10 was, where they were changing the Police Act under the Emergency Act and all these different things. And suddenly this post that I made on Twitter that got 200 views got the attention of the elections commissioner, because one of their IT people found it and thought it was, oh, this is a red flag. This guy's making a bunch of money. I'm going, okay, how is this?
What?
Yeah, how does this make sense? I'm going, there's a woman in Edmonton that's making Fuck You Kenny mugs and making a mint off them. And she's on the news and everyone's showing, and Jagmeet Singh's into there, and Janice Irwin and Rachel. And they've got like Better Off with Rachel mugs and all these different things. No one talks about that. But this guy who had these shirts that could have gone viral, but never went viral, is the threat. But the threat was, you're right, the threat was the voice that I had and having that information. So that was how they did it, and they decimated me financially. We're still trying to fight back from it, but that's why we became the third-party advertiser, is to have that protection of being able to have conversations like this and know that this is a political conversation under a third-party advertiser status, not just your regular citizen having a conversation. Because in Alberta, you have to protect yourself. However,
first, I'm really sorry that happened. That sucks. I know exactly what it feels like, the financial hardship from things that are well outside your controls. Alberta is going in a direction that really terrifies me. There is allegations and alleged conversations that have happened where somebody from Canada has told the U.S. that Alberta will be the first place to leave. Who knows how true that is? A lot of the information coming out of the US is messy and unverifiable, unfortunately. Again, this is just rumors at this point. We haven't seen these bills. So I'll say it is alleged that they're going to go after some censorship, and they're going to use the queer community to do it. And they're going to do some really predatory things that are going to cause a lot of people to go, holy crap, why are you attacking this marginalized group of people? And so we're all going to be looking over there trying to protect this marginalized group of people, and then they're going to slide in censorship over behind it. Right. So it really truly is just distraction. Like, how can we keep the eyeballs who would be looking for this distracted, because we're attacking this group over here, and then we're doing some really crazy stuff behind the scenes. And even with a lot of the stuff that's going on with trans youth and getting rid of access to medical care and all that kind of stuff, simultaneously at the same time, you have Stephen Harper suddenly popping up and working with the government of Alberta and taking charge of AIMCO. You've got all of these incredibly problematic bills. You've got huge financial payouts for random people to do basically nothing. It's all just distraction, because a lot of us are like, hey, stop attacking that nice community. And they're like, yeah, stay over there. Keep looking over there. And then they're doing really terrible things, and nobody's noticing.
Yeah, I totally agree with the Stephen Harper. The only caveat that I would say is people don't understand that the actual, use the Star Wars analogy, Stephen Harper is Snoke.
No, he is. Yes, he is. I fully agree.
Palpatine is Preston Manning. Now, that's what people need to understand.
Yes.
85-year-old Preston Manning,
yes.
He is the freaking Dark Lord. He is Lord Palpatine. Like, he is Emperor Palpatine. And if people don't get that, the fact that this old bugger is connected to this, connected to that, like, Okay, the government of Alberta gave you $250,000 to tell us that COVID regulations were not okay and it was against the human rights. We did a video. We went and connected. The current co-prime minister of New Zealand worked for Preston Manning and the Manning Foundation back mid-2000s, was going after the city of Calgary when Nenshi was mayor, and it's directly connected. Now he's, like I said, he's a co-prime minister. Don't get me wrong. Harper is Snoke. Harper and IDU, that is all awful and whatever, but the puppet master is that old bugger Preston Manning, and he learned it from his dad. And people are going, oh, well, he's just reform. Yeah, he did that because he wanted to be likable. He did that to try and win people over. Ultimately, his prime minister he wanted was Stockwell Day. But Stockwell Day was too much of a Looney Tune to get in to become prime minister. So he found the robotic Snoke of Stephen Harper to do his bidding. Pictures of Preston Manning with a young Pierre Polyev. This is the Strong and Free Network or whatever. He keeps renaming things. So whatever that is, they've got a whole system where they basically do like the Republicans, where you have the young Republicans, you have the young conservatives, where they mentor you, would put you with a long-term conservative, and it's brainwashing, and it's all these things.
I really want to remind everybody as well that Preston Manning used to have the Manning Foundation, like his whole thing. It was a right-wing propaganda machine, and they were paying for third-party advertiser space on Meta. They were setting up fake accounts on Facebook. They paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it. They were infiltrating small town community pages on Facebook and just starting stuff. They were posting like, I don't think I really like Justin Trudeau, to deliberately stoke the fires. This was before COVID. They got busted doing this in 2018. They had to pay out hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines. In 2019, they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on this advertising. They dissolved the Manning Foundation and then started something called Canada Strong and Free, which is still active today, which is paying content creators, which has an entire media strategy thing. If you're between the ages of 19 and 30, you can apply to become a content influencer for Canada Strong and Free. They will teach you. They will give you a microphone. They will give you money. They will fly you to conventions. They will put you in front of Pierre Polyev so that you can interview him, and you will present yourself as if you're a centrist on the internet. They are all connected to Canada Strong and Free. And some of Canada's worst humans go to their events and perpetuate their propaganda. They are fueling the worst of the worst, and they are still active today. This is an organization that got caught buying and perpetuating propaganda, and all they did was change their name, and they're still doing it today. They're still doing it today. They're still active. I hate Preston Manning.
I despise that. He is an awful human being. The old videos there. Yeah, he's working for the Rapture. Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
He was at going to the prayer breakfast. If you have not watched it and you have Netflix, watch The Family. You will see Preston Manning's, not Preston Manning himself, because he's not directly connected to that per se. He's the Canadian part. So if you watch, it's boring as hell, but
yeah.
that is the whole. The whole premise of it is just repulsive, and how you think that you're voting, like that a vote actually matters when it comes to these things, when these decisions of who is going to be in power are made by these oligarchs or whatever. And
things.
Yeah, it's just awful. The side on that, which we found out, Preston Manning Foundation is still in existence. The Canada Strong and Free Network actually does not have a charitable status. The charitable status is the Preston Manning Foundation.
so they're running money.
Yeah. So they're
Yeah.
funneling the
And
money
he,
through it to that. And the Manning Foundation's office where they collect the checks is a UPS store in Kelowna.
but Manning also has an education network, like a post-secondary education network, where you can pay to learn his curriculum. And it's the same thing. The school address is the P.O. Box in Kelowna. So in my opinion, I feel like Preston Manning is a grifter in a lot of ways. And sometimes I really question if he actually believes his own narrative and the things that he's perpetuating, or I don't understand him. I do not understand.
Well, he learned from his dad.
End goal doesn't make sense.
But his dad, like if you look at
from his dad, a lot of people don't know. Yeah.
That like his dad, like if anyone wants to, there's articles there, there's book. I mean, we're in Alberta, so go and look up old William Aberhart. You know, it's not just a school name. Bible Bill was the start of the evangelical revolution for politicians here in Canada. And it was actually Bible Bill's ideas that started the Reaganomics and the evangelicals in the 70s under Nixon and then Reagan that brought in Christianity. When Bible Bill had his radio show, which then, as much as Ernest Manning, Preston Manning's dad, was not a very likable or boisterous voice or whatever, but he had the radio contracts, so he could spew his evangelical bullshit to everyone under the guise of Canada Strong. The thing that people need to understand, and I really want to go deep into this at some point, like when we look at it like an Overton window, for people, there's this. So it starts with your evil people, and then you've got your bad people, then you've got your nice people, because you can always fake being nice. Then you've got your good and kind people. And there's not a lot of good and kind people. Well, like when you look at the Aberharts and the Mannings and whatever, I would say they're more on the evil side because of the shit that they do, but they're at least on the bad side. But then they do good things, like most bad people will do good things, so you don't see them just being bad. We're going to do so when it was Bible Bill and Ernest Manning, they did soup kitchens because it was the middle of Depression. So then they would get these people from all over the country on train stopping in Calgary to go to a soup kitchen and feed them. Then he'd feed them all this bullshit about evangelical conservatism. And then suddenly, vote for this party and we can change Canada. This isn't Tommy Douglas changing Canada. This is the shit that we're dealing with now with the MAGA and the Maple MAGA. This started in the 1930s.
Way
for us in Alberta.
Yeah, in a grassroots movement in Alberta for almost since the foundations of Alberta, and it's only getting worse and it's continued to perpetuate. There's a number of those examples even today, like the Nixon brothers and Pat Nixon and the mustard seed and all of that stuff. And again, breakfast, everything going on with Recovery Alberta and who they've hired to write their new policies and procedures for these. Make no mistakes, these are forced institutionalizations of people that they decide have addictions. There's no metric to decide who is going to be put into this situation. There's no plan or exit from these situations. So on the surface, people are like, wow, they're really helping people who are struggling with addiction. But behind the scenes, it's just forced internment. They're just out of sight, out of mind, a bunch of people. And like, I don't want to get you into trouble, but the Nixon brothers have done stuff, and Pat Nixon has done some stuff. And they are very not great people, but because the mustard has helped a lot of people, it really truly has. So great. They're doing such great work. It's the duality of humans where we kind of just flip-flop. And then as somebody who's trying to advocate for more equal treatment and really putting human beings first before money and before agenda and before all of that kind of stuff, I get a lot of pushback because if I talk ill on an organization, lenses are really good at individualizing somebody, so they don't see what this organization is doing behind the scenes. They don't see the bad money that's funneling into them. They see the agenda. And then you're left with an absolute calamity, and you've got a bunch of people in your comment section saying, I can't believe that you're talking ill of this organization. They saved my life.
Yeah.
Two things can kind of be true at once. It's very common. And, you know, there's a really good chance that this new Recovery Alberta strategy might help some people, but it's also most likely going to harm a lot of people. It's going to cause a lot of bad. So how do we have constructive conversations about it and actually fix it and move forward and find tangible solutions if we can't have constructive conversations with the people involved?
I mean, that goes from all sides from your food banks to your shelters, to your organizations. I mean, what people need to realize, I worked for Canadian Blood Services. I worked for a number of nonprofits, as a company or volunteer, or for the nonprofits itself. Nonprofits are corporations. You need to understand that. Unless it's a grassroots organization,
they're registered corporations.
They're registered corporations that will spend as much money as humanly possible to build their brand, and then make sure that they don't have a profit at the end of the day. That is their goal, is to make sure that, so they keep their not-for-profit or nonprofit status. They can't be profitable, so they'll just give money away, but they're not giving money away to programs. They're cutting the programs left, right, and center. They're making their staff work, skeleton staff work, to do the jobs of 3 or 4 people, and rely on their volunteer base to do even more, while the executives are cashing in and all their buddies are being paid the contracts to be the official this or the official that of these organizations. Or just visibility. Both?
Yeah. This is what happened in Vancouver right before the 2010 Olympics.
Yes, I lived on Vancouver Island when it was there. So it was the whole thing of
when the Olympics.
Yeah, the Gordon Campbell moving all the houseless.
So myself and my husband actually lived in the downtown east side for quite a while before we moved to Calgary. And I worked in the downtown east side. I advocated in that space. I participated in a lot of stuff in that space. And right before the Olympics, starting around, I would say 2008, there was a big push to gentrify that area. They wanted Vancouver to look a certain aesthetic. International eyeballs are going to be on Vancouver. And you could start to see it, but I would say not a handful of weeks before the actual Olympics, buses showed up in the downtown east side, scooped everybody up that they deemed undesirable, and just shipped them out. And they dumped them all over BC. They pushed them into the interior. And there's allegations that there's hundreds of people who are still missing. There was no proper checks to see where these people were going. There was no resources. They took people who were already in a really home insecure situation, a lot with mental health issues, a lot with active addictions, and they just dumped them all over BC. And so there's also municipalities across British Columbia that are struggling because they have this huge influx of people who needed services, and they have no resources to treat any of these people. But boy, did Vancouver look good during the Olympics. Sure looked nice. I personally think the UCP is trying to do that on a really big scale. There was some pushback and some conversation and some Q&A for Recovery Alberta of the question of, okay, so you put a person in this program, the person is actively using, at some point in time they detox. So when do they become cogent enough to make the decision to leave? If they want to leave, you're putting them in because they're actively using. Okay, 3 days in, they're detoxed. Are they allowed to make the decision to leave? And the answer was, I don't know. No idea. Not sure. That's a really scary answer. The fact that you don't know how people get into the program or how people get out of the program, in my opinion, that's really, in my opinion, something bigger and scarier is going on, and I don't really much what can boil that with it. But when you institutionalize people against their wishes and say they cannot leave, in my opinion, that leads to eugenics, that leads to labor camps, that leads to this is not going to have a good outcome. And because of the lack of answers and the lack of structure of who gets in, who can get out, what's the actual timeline, it got me asking a lot of questions. I'm trying really hard not to assume we're going to end up at internment camps, but it's starting to look a lot like that. And just to your point about nonprofits, where you don't really have a great crew, there's not a ton of money being spent on labor, but yeah, you have executive boards that some executive boards that I've researched have had 25 people on it, and every single one of those people has a salary, but then the actual organization is ran almost exclusively by like 3 actual staff and then all volunteers. That dynamic leads to a lot of situations where there's not enough actual staff managing the situation. And so you're going to take a bunch of people who are in active addiction, who most likely have mental health issues. You're going to dump them into buildings that you have not shown us what they look like. You have no plan for staffing. You're most likely going to skeleton crew it and probably hire a bunch of like $18 an hour people to hang out. It's sort of lockdown. Is it lockdown? We don't fully understand. Nothing good is going to come from this. Nothing good.
Nothing good is happening here. Part of the advisory council for HS before they did the revamp. I was part of the initial discussions on Recovery Alberta, and I actually questioned the word recovery. I'm going, well, if you're an addict, you don't really recover. It's road to recovery. Like, you're never fully recovered, most people.
Yeah.
Like, you always have your addiction. So I got a lot of pushback on that. Oh, don't worry, we're going to set up this app. I'm going, what the hell is this app? It was part of the connected to that New Westminster, BC, allegedly connected to Marshall Smith. Anyway, so they were talking about this app at one of our meetings, and I'm going, this is just crap. Like, how is an addict going to use an app? Like, oh, well, you just check in. I'm like, okay, if you're struggling with addiction, times you're just going to lie. So because you need real help. But this is just a way for you to monitor these people. And once you're in the app, I was asking, well, who has this information? Oh, well, we can't disclose that. It's private. I'm going, is this like private, like the TELUS Babylon, that the information just suddenly went missing? Like, are we talking about that? Oh, well, we can't, whatever. And I'm like, okay, so if someone wants to get out of the program or has gone through the program and is now considered recovered, who has access to this information? Do you have to disclose you were part of this program? And what I was getting is that employers could access this information, that potential employers could contact the government to see if this person was actually went through the recovery. And going, so these poor people that are dealing with addiction, that basically if they don't have the supports, they're going to die. You're giving a death sentence of being monitored for the rest of their lives.
It's the lack of clarity on questions like that is causing my red flags to constantly be up around this entire program. Also, the conversation that's now added about quote unquote recovery capital and the cost return value of somebody. Oh, that's a what? Pardon? What do you mean? You're deciding what a person's value is, and the only reason why you're intervening is because you want them to be part of the tax base and you want to make revenue off of them. But then also, I know how predatory a lot of these recovery programs are. Are you going to expect a return? Like, if somebody was in this program, are they going to walk out now considered quote unquote cured and recovered and now a viable member of society? Are you going to say, now you have to pay us back for the time that you were in this program? Like, what's going on here? Because there's too much gray, and there really shouldn't be in government programs. That's the one thing you cannot afford to have is question marks. Like, they should be able to tell you who has the data, how long the data is stored, how it's protected, who has access. They should be able to define what recovery capital actually is. They should tell us how long somebody will be in the program, what's the entry structure, what's the exit structure. But it's the fact that they can't that has a lot of advocates in the space saying something's not adding up here. This really doesn't make a ton of sense. And when you pair it with a lot of the changes to the Healthcare Act, as far as like the oversight minister and giving one person unilateral control and decision making for all healthcare matters, and it being not someone from healthcare, and they've temporarily put LaGrange in that position, like, okay, cool, I guess. It's stuff like that that has me just going, what the hell are you doing? What is happening right now? Yeah, I struggle with it a lot because, you know, I really respect your opinion of just not even wanting to get involved in politics. They're all the same. We're just fighting for teams. We're not actually solving any problems.
Yeah.
I'm in the headspace of we have to work within the parameters of the system that we have and fix it from within, because we're not at a place that we're ready for an actual revolution, because we still have members of our community who think that sweeping up a bunch of people with addictions that they've decided don't have value and are undesirable is a great idea. There's a lot of really questionable decision making for some people. And so how we actually tear down our entire government, rebuild it in a model that's better, while still dealing with people who do have this ideology and don't think that all human life has value, and think that there's conditions. You know, if a person doesn't meet a metric that they've decided, that person has no value of any kind. So my opinion is the most effective way is to work with the least shitty party and kind of demand accountability from that party and try to rebuild the house from within. I also believe voting is democracy. I think it's step one of democracy, like it's standing outside the door. And so then you get into the house and then you can start to remodel it. So I'm stuck in a place because 25% of the time I'm like, revolution, burn it down. Have we tried maybe like turning it on and turning it on again? Like, we give that a try. But I just don't know how effective that would actually be, because we also have human beings who need to eat and need clean water. So can we fix a system that at one point in time was okay, and can we make it substantially better? Or do we need to completely throw out the baby with the bathwater and try again?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Those are very good points. I guess the one I keep going to, and I mean, this is popular in some aspects, very unpopular in others. I question the royal assent and lieutenant governor. I honestly do. I sit here and go, what the hell do you do other than rubber stamp something through? Like, how is that actually benefit anyone outside of these corrupt governments to know that you're not going to stand up for citizens because the monarchy has made the choice that we're not going to be political? But I'm going, okay, when it was a different circumstance, I could understand, okay, it got a little revolutionary here, so we don't want to start another one, so we're just going to throw up our hands. Like Her Honor Lakaney, who presents herself as a voice of women and a voice for the voiceless, and like going to Indigenous events and whatever, and then signing off on bills 33, 34, 26, 10, like these things that are direct violation of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and not saying anything. I really have a hard time just sitting here going, okay, I understand your position is this, but according to our parliamentary system, your position is our safety net. So if we can't rely on the government to be, I guess, human would be the best way to put it, how do we get through?
I think that's a really good question, and I think we're almost ready to have that discussion. I think there's other organizations as well that are supposed to be our safety nets and police force of stopping corruption who are also not stepping in. So I don't think it's just that avenue. I personally think we need to reevaluate the entire structure and who has authority to do what, because we've done such a bad job of holding corruption accountable. And yeah, I understand the frustration of like, oh, they signed this bill and it passes and it gets sent and it's gone and it's away. I think almost take it down further. It needs to not even be able to get to that point, and it's more vetted. And I think we need tougher expectations on our parties. If you're caught in any corruption, you're out. What I'm saying is there's no teeth in any of these organizations to actually do anything. So you have very high-ranking RCMP officers standing up and saying, investigated Jason Kenney for 5 years. We found 2 very credible examples of voter manipulation with the kamikaze candidate, as well as actual voter fraud, and we can't do anything about it. So all the safety nets have failed within the Alberta government and other governments across Canada. There is nothing that none of these regulatory bodies can do anything to intervene. And then by the time the bill makes its way to a place where it's getting signed off, I don't even know if they're the ones who are necessarily the problem. I think it starts lower, and we need safety nets throughout the entire process to make sure it can't even get to the point where it's getting signed into law. And I don't understand how Danielle Smith is not in incredibly deep hot water with all the gift scandals, with all of these Category Z expenses and payouts to friends, to people who have not actually done the service they're being paid for. There's so much of it. It's so blatant. And I think that's why people are checking out, because they're realizing that nothing is going to get done. And so you're starting to lose, people are getting really put off by this, because they're like, well, I can see that this is bad and no one's doing anything. And even if you want to take it a step further, we all just watched Pierre Poilievre campaign for the last how long? And Election Canada did nothing about it. It's both. It's both. So I fully agree, but I kind of think that I think we need to take down lower. I think it needs to go, we need to start lower and stop it before it can even get to that point. But again, we got to get in the house to fix, we got to do some renovations from inside the house before we can deal with any of this stuff. Because that's, in my opinion, that's the truth.
Can we kick the door in? Can we do the police battering ram? Would that be? I totally agree with your concept there. I think we're all fighting on the lawn like it's a bad party, that we're at a bush party and we're on the lawn and we all had too many drinks and we're all out there throwing punches instead of going into the house to fix things.
And
because the call is really coming from inside the house. Yes.
I think the left is really bad for tearing itself apart as well. Like, we do one hell of a job of incorrectly pleading ourselves and being like, you're not enough ally, you're not doing enough. We'll throw people out and not really ever give a chance for redemption. Or if there's somebody, organization, maybe have a problem with history who wants to do it, we're not great at making space for them.
Yeah.
And we're so busy fighting each other that all of that energy is wasted. And meanwhile, the people we should be super stressed about are tiptoeing past us and walking into the house and changing all our laws right underneath our noses.
Themselves a progressive, but they really just want a different shade of conservative. And I don't like the UCP, but I'm still conservative. I'm going, but conservative, what has conservative gotten us? Like, if we look historically, what has conservative gotten society? And if you're okay with that, that's that whole question of, if we can't move forward in a revolutionary system, if we have people that still believe that not every life matters, that we start with of course, we start with the Black Lives Matter, Indigenous Lives Matter, the as my child would say, the alphabet mafia matters, and then we can go to the lives. But mine is more, like I said, ADHD and stuff. My wife has fibro. You're dealing with disability. I mean, that's the struggle that I see. There's a lot of us disabled people that are very angry, that are doing what we can, that have the energy to do stuff like this, but can't get out and protest every freaking 5 minutes. But our efforts aren't looked at as important as the efforts of someone who goes to the ledge every Saturday?
That's when it gets really tricky. I also get stuck in this place where I have run into so many people who show up with a sign, pat themselves on the back, and then go back to doing nothing. And I would rather see people actively involved. I saw a really incredible thing on the internet where there was a library meeting that just happened, and the woman who was the president of the library board was super mad because a trans person stood up and said, "Hey, I exist." And people were rallying around the trans person, and they were trying to ban books, and it got really elevated and really heated. And so the woman who was leading the meeting called the police, and there was an actual like neo-Nazi sitting behind her who is incredibly problematic and incredibly terrible. He is known. They know what associations he's connected to. And this woman was siding herself with this man, and an elderly woman stood up and called her a Nazi and called her out. And the entire time I was like, more of this. I don't need your sign. I need you to actually like stand here and call people out and be a part of this conversation, because it's truthfully, I want both. I want people to protest, and sometimes it feels like the protest is falling flat. Like we get really radicalized, and we come and we do our thing, and we've got all the signs, and we're doing the correct steps, and then we forget about it.
Yeah.
I want you to do stuff in between, even if it's just a little tiny bit, like read an article, look into the history, find out who these people are, be educated about the voting process, know what's the difference between a municipal, a provincial, and a federal government. It's not all Justin Trudeau's fault. So learn who is accountable for the things that are falling apart. I've had so many conversations in my own community of people saying like the hospital wait times are terrible, and this is awful, and that's awful, and every single thing they're talking about is municipal, and all of it is being blamed on Justin Trudeau. And provincial. It's all provincial and municipal, and they're blaming every single step of it on Justin Trudeau. It's not his job, babe. That's not what he is in charge of. Learn who's in charge of what, and call them, email them. If you only have 10 minutes of energy and time that you can devote to activism, spend it going to the right people. Learn who the right people are and engage with the right people. And the left is very good at performing activism, but not actually doing activism. I also have a really firm belief that something vitally important to any revolution is rest and community. So make sure you're taking care of yourself and prioritizing yourself, and making sure you're prioritizing your community and getting actively involved. Because all of a sudden, when you're hanging out, having a music festival in your local park and everybody's dancing, no one gives a flying crap about what the UCP is doing. And you really want to protect your green space. And nobody cares about any of that other stuff. And it's incredibly effective. The most effective thing you can do is build a community, whether that be through craft, art, entertainment, anything that brings people together. All of a sudden, you start to look at everything the UCP is doing and go, wow, that's really against community. And I feel the best when I'm with my community and doing something really engaging. And then you start to kind of change people's perspective, because a lot of policies on the right don't want us to be in community. They don't want us to be connected to each other and see each other's humanity. So spend 10 minutes a week finding humanity. And then all of a sudden, all of us are going, oh, I hate this political practice. That's mine. 2 cents.
That is great advice, and I would just add, if you don't have the energy, or like if you're not comfortable meeting people in person, if you do connect with people
Meet
online,
online.
that is
Yeah.
still community. That, like, don't fall into this whole thing that online doesn't, like, that they're not real people or whatever. People that you meet online, if you're doing a FaceTime, you're doing what we're doing tonight, that is real community. That is, we're having these conversations. It's, don't feel like you're alone. You're not alone. There's a lot of us that are behind you, and if you feel the struggle or whatever, please reach out to us. Like we always say, that we're here. We'll be a voice. If you want someone to say something that you're scared to say, I'll say it. I have no problem saying a lot of things that most people don't want to say. It's if I was worried about that, it was gone long ago. But it's those things. But please reach out. Like I said, I started. Number one, the idea on the Accountability Alliance was to protect my ass. Don't get me wrong. It was cover my ass, because the only way I'm going to be able to do anything is if I am not going to face any sort of legalities. But the other piece is to get like-minded people together. And like you said, if people want to be a part of it, we've got open aspects. Like people say, well, you're the alliance. I said, right now I am the alliance, because the people that we had originally didn't see a long-term idea on what this could actually be. And this, like, the first idea is the community piece. And when I was sitting there and going, what could we do for the community? That's when I came up with the Mutual Aid Manifesto for Alberta. And you can find it at aballiance.ca. You can look it up. You can ask questions, whatever the case may be. Like I said, you can find us. You can find Knitty. Just connect with people. Like more of us that are like-minded need to connect and get our messages out to the masses that are being distracted by those that, like you said, go in with take their selfie with their sign and then go home and forget about everything until the next protest.
There's a place for everybody in whatever happens over the next 5 years, 10 years. I think it's just really important to find a place that you can feel safe in such tumultuous times, because I think fear really radicalized people, and it's something that you saw through all of Reagan's presidents. He leaned into fear, and the more scared people were because of the economic instability and destructuring of public programs and walking away from any type of socialism that America had in place, it didn't lead to people disliking Reagan. It led to like Nazis, and it led to a radicalization of rural United States. So learn about that and how that happened, because it's gonna happen in rural Alberta. It's something we've been dealing with forever, and it's just going to continue to get dialed up as people get scared. So part of finding community is also just finding a place that you feel safe, because if you feel safe, you're less likely to get radicalized, and so are the people in your little. The pipeline is so real. The pipeline is so real. So I know it's cheesy, and I know some people are like, Knitty, stop talking about fiber arts, but really truly knitting meetups and quilting guilds and doing things where you're coming together and you're sharing your craft, you can be terrible at it. I go to a knitting guild where this one woman has never finished anything. She's just there for the vibes. She's there for the chit chats. And it is one of the most inclusive, progressive spaces I've ever been. The first day that I went to this quilting guild, I sat down at a table, and this delightful old woman who's 85 years old said, "So Trump's a piece of shit, hey?" And I was like, this is the best place ever. Like, I love this place. And they share resources, and they check in on each other. I recently just had pneumonia. I missed a bunch of sessions. They're emailing me and checking in on me. And I felt really seen. I felt like there was people in the world outside of my four walls who really cared. And it's really, really important. And I know that it sounds so dumb when we're looking at how many problems there are in the world. We're like, go find some friends. But it is vitally important to whatever is happening in this space. And individualism is a tactic. It is something that white supremacy and supremacy models has utilized. And the more hyper individualized we are, the worse off we are. And when you have so much infighting in progressive and leftist spaces, all it's doing is individualizing people and pushing them to that radicalized space. So like, just find something you can get along with. I'm not saying go love everybody and like everybody. Find a place of tolerance where you can really build community, and let's try and stop the pipeline, because people are going to get even more scared over the next probably year with all these tariffs, and it's most likely going to get worse. You add in the fact that Danielle Smith is taking away healthcare, taking away AISH allegedly and restructuring it, adding in Recovery Alberta, putting a lot of question marks in our head. You're going to have a lot of people who are scared. So my priority is always, how do we not be scared and come together instead of being scared and pushed apart?
Shop the Team Canada collection by ADC. We are Canadian. Elbows up. Nadia V-neck for the ladies. Salvador tee for the men. Designed in Alberta. Created and distributed in Montreal. Product of Canada. Made in Canada. Only available at teamcanada.shop. This has been Allegedly in Alberta. Authorized by Alberta Accountability Alliance, abpolica@gmail.com.